Welcome to the Law Dad Roy podcast, featuring trial dad and trial lawyer Roy Willy. Join us as we break down the biggest cases, the legal strategies that shape justice, and the stories behind the courtroom victories. Whether you're a legal pro, a curious mind, or just here for the ride, this is the podcast for you. Let's talk law, let's talk justice, let's talk winning. And now from beautiful downtown Charleston, South Carolina, here is your host, Law Dad Roy Willy.
There is lawyering and then there is law firm growth, and we have received a lot of questions after one of our recent episodes about and from new lawyers who are getting into the PI space, one lawyer with a laptop, and the basic crux of the questions are, how do I go from one lawyer and a laptop to a multi-city, multi-state, high-performing team? And the key to that, obviously you have to do good lawyering, right? Good lawyering can set you back. That's not what we're going to focus on for purposes of this episode. What I really wanted to focus on here, pulling you in as a chief growth officer of the law firm, multiple law firms really, and with Justice Mark, which is our marketing agency, obviously, that we have and we run separately. We don't talk a lot about it because we don't really advertise. It's all word of mouth. Right. We represent folks through word of mouth, and candidly, we don't seek to represent a lot of folks. We handpick our clients, people we think that we can really help with. Right. But that's really what I want to focus in on today for those people that are out there that are just starting out, or maybe have been at it for a while and haven't been able to see that kind of growth. When we go in, when we look at a law firm, we look at an operation and we say, okay, how can we help you grow? Right. Explain, a little bit about what we're looking for at that sort of foundational base level.
I mean, I think a lot of it just starts with what do you want to accomplish? I think you have to know really what do you want to accomplish, not just a year from now,
trying to be comfortable, or are you a masochist?
Or are you trying to kill yourself, right? Right. I think the second part is who are you? Right, and who are you? Not just individually, because I think that's important, right? Because you need to know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, right? But also who are you trying to serve, and how are you trying to serve them best, right? Because there's some law firms that just want to be churning them out, right, and just boom, 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 move them in. There's some that are trying to grow, but also want to try to maintain really close personal relationships, which is a challenging thing, right? Because they want those people to be their attorney for life, right, for multiple things. So I don't think, and I personally think that with anything, self-awareness is the key to so much success. And especially when you're trying to build a business and you're trying to make that business grow, you need to be totally self-aware because it's hard to get out of your comfort zone. Right. And it's really it's even more challenging to not just get out of that comfort zone, but figure out ways that you might be uncomfortable, right, in doing so with growth, right? I always say pick your pain, right? Yeah. There's some pain with any path you go down. There are some lawyers that, really just want a lot of volume, and, to your point, it's a churn and burn, settlement mill type situation of low impact, low value type cases. They're not concerned with building value, not really concerned with building relationships. They're just taking in a lot of clients. Get them in, get them out.
Right. Yeah. And the client wants to check quickly and wants it to be over with and whatever. That is a model, right, that some law firms are built on. There's pain associated with that. Your clientele doesn't really have a connection or loyalty to you, and so, that whole thing. And then there's other people that, really want to build those high-value relationships with clients, build cases, and that requires less volume, right? Because there's two ways from a revenue standpoint in a law firm to look at it. You can look at, okay, well, our average case value is this. If we know our average case value is, let's say $20,000. So off of our average case, we're getting a $20,000 fee. That's great. That's fine. Two ways to grow. We can go get 3 more of those, right? Every day or every hour, every week, whatever. Or we can increase our average case value and make that $20,000 case a $60,000 case. We've grown our law firm that way because revenue has grown. So to your point, the authenticity of the person and knowing what they have a tolerance for is really where we start, right? Yep. That's where we start. Whenever we're talking, through Justice Mark, obviously with a potential new client, or just through mentoring and talking to people that we know in the industry, we always start with like, what are you looking to do? And it's not a salesy, superficial question. Like, it's a really critical question.
Right. No, it's 100%. Like, I think, there's some people that are just, let's be honest. There's some people in business that are just looking to make money.
Right.
And that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Sure. But there's people that want to make money quickly, right? But there's also people that see, again, it's creating a vision, right? That says, okay, I'm okay in 2 years being here because I know there's going to be pain points along the way.
Right.
As long as I'm obtaining the relationships that I want. You're right. So, yeah, I think that if you don't know exactly in the legal space who you're trying to serve, who you want to serve, right? What your strengths are. And also, frankly, too, having the patience to understand that, like, you just can't. Frankly, even if you went and spent a ton of money right now, today, that's not necessarily going to get you what you want.
Right.
You might get a couple of clients, but is the operation built to handle such, right? Is the infrastructure there, right? Can you handle that much more call volume, right? How important are relationships to you with clients? Like,
Yeah, from my standpoint, it's critical. We are in, that is the business we are in. We are in a client service business. Yes, law is involved, lawsuits are involved, but at the end of the day, what I always tell people is that 90% of the people call us not looking for an attorney, they're looking for an audience.
Yeah.
They are in a very tough spot in their life. They do not know, whether to go left, right, or center. They've never been here before. Mm-hmm. They need a roadmap. They need somebody they can, that can advise them. And it's not a situation where you can or you should just turn to Cousin Betty at the barbecue and say, hey, what do you think I should do?
Right.
Because there are people out there in the community, lawyers, that have experience dealing with similar situations, whereas most people don't. To the extent they have any experience dealing with it, it was their situation. And we always say this, we're required to say it at the bottom of our, any advertising. Right. Every case is based on its independent facts, right? Yeah. That is true.
Yeah.
And so if you're going and looking for advice, you want somebody that has dealt with a lot of, fact patterns. But relationships are key. It's why in our law firms, one of the things that, metrics we look at is how many of our clients last week, last month, last quarter were prior clients or referred by prior clients, right? That kind of word of mouth referral. And because we advertise a lot, we want to target that at, about 1/3 to 40% as our goal. That's our goal target. If we can get 1/3 or 40% of our clients from prior client referrals, and word of mouth, that really insulates us as a business where we have a lot of people relying on our revenue because we're supporting literally hundreds of families, across the plate, across the firm. So how do you insulate? Well, you insulate that because no matter what happens in the market, new spenders, more spenders, different advertising technique, different search, Google update, whatever, that is constant.
Right. And it starts, I think, and this is why it goes back to like making sure that your organization is in order, is it starts right from the beginning. Right. And it starts from the initial touch right from the beginning. Obviously the advertising you can say is the initial touch. But as those of you who are listening can go online and see our Google reviews for, just the Ossipool law firm in general. And a lot of those people that review us are talking about the first connection that they had. Right. And the conversation that they had. Right. And if it's a churn and burn, challenging to do that, right? And especially to have them come back again.
Right.
But I think like having like the first step be an empathetic, important, like meaningful conversation. Right. There's people that we've had that are on calls that are on the phone for an hour and a half.
Right.
Because again, they just want an audience.
And it's a case that we can't even take.
Case that we might not be able to take.
Right. But that person may have a case in the future, their family may have a case in the future, but more than like them having a case, it's just the right thing to do.
Right.
They've called us to confide in us and tell us their most, troubling thing that's happening in their life. We owe it to them to listen. Even if we can't help, perhaps we can give them a referral or a recommendation or something, that can help them along. And I think that's the authenticity piece, right? That interaction has to match the advertising. Mm-hmm. You can't say, for example, well, we're available 24/7 to take your call, and then I call sometime in 24/7 because that's all the time, and I get a voicemail.
Right.
Or I get, some answering service, which is quite clearly has no idea what's going on.
Or it's automated.
Or it's automated, or whatever. Like, if you're going to say that, you have to be able to get back to people 24/7 to answer those calls, Just like if you're going to put forward, the image of being a tough trial lawyer, of negotiating for every dollar, well, it would not be very good client service or authentic to then be on the back end badgering your client down to accept less money because
100%.
you're scared to go to court.
You don't want to go to court.
Or whatever.
Right.
So the authenticity piece and really figuring out who the lawyer is important. Everybody has somebody that will relate to them for the most part. And figuring that part out, is key. So that's the first part, is to say, okay, well, who am I? What do I want to do? What type of pain do I want? Because there's pain associated with everything. That's what the money is for. As I tell people, that's what the paycheck's for, is the pain that you have to go through to get it. And you have to decide that. So let's set that aside. So we go through that process, we figure it out. In general, the lawyers that are, ask these questions are in some market, right? They just by definition of them being lawyers in the United States, you're in a designated market area, you're in a DMA. So we look at that, right? And explain a little bit about, obviously we have a lot of tools, on the Justice Mark side, on the marketing side, the agency side that most law firms don't have, that aren't available, to a lot of, that are expensive, frankly, or monthlies or whatever. Explain a little bit about how we look at DMAs, what that analysis looks like what type of information we're able to...
You have to know who you're competing against, right? I think if you're just going to, again, it goes back to I'm just going to spend a lot of money. And frankly, I and you have talked to people, not just in the agency space, but also just other lawyers that say well, I just wrote a check to a marketing firm and they didn't give me anything, right? So, yeah, I think you have to know who you're competing against. You also have to know, if you're looking to scale, where do you want to expand to, right? There's some people that not necessarily want to get bigger in the DMA that they're in. Let's say I'm in Atlanta, for example, which is so competitive it's hard to even breathe. And you're doing okay. Well, maybe you're thinking I want to go somewhere else, right? Well, then I think the research really starts to be okay, are the cases there for you? How much can you get, right? It's not just a matter of going to, somewhere in Iowa and opening up an office and hoping that you can serve certain people. Again, going back to what you know and who you are, right? Do you fit in that right space? So I think the research side is right. And there are a lot of free tools available. But I also think that hiring a professional who's been in that space before is incredibly important, because if you're going to try to expand into different DMAs, there's a lot of things that go into that. From the prices of the buy are different. TV ads are different in Charleston than they are in Houston.
Right.
Radio ads are different. Billboard ads are different. Right. Google ads are more expensive. Right. So I think, again, you have to have a good understanding of your internal operations. Right. Again, back to self-awareness. Right. To be able to say, okay, I know how my law firm operates.
Right.
I know how I can get a case. I know what it costs for me to get that case, right? So now, can you do that in looking at another location?
Right.
Which is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of the things, and we're going to get to intake in a minute, because I think that's the key thing that you've got to really get honed in. Most law firms are bleeding leads. There are more cases
all the time
seeking their services than they're getting, because their intake, their contact system is garbage, frankly. The front end piece, just in terms of looking at a DMA, we're able to see exactly how much money every single month is being spent on TV, who's spending it
every single week,
who they're spending on TV, what they're spending on digital. For the most part, digital's a little more cloudy, but we've got good
it's
tools.
better than what it was 5 years ago.
You can see their billboard advertising, so you can get a picture of the whole DMA.
Right.
We're then able to take that, and we know that you can count on, our internal number is to count on conservatively about 1% of the population getting into an injury car wreck every single year. Let's just take car wrecks, for example, and we have this broken down. So then what we're able to see is, okay, well, the annual spend in this DMA is X. The population in this DMA is Y. That tells us that if you were to go get every case for that spend, let's just assume that the advertisers are buying every case. They're not.
Right.
They're only buying about 60% of the cases. About 40% of the cases are going to people that know lawyers, and they're getting private referrals and all of that. And even that 100% of the cases that are actually using a lawyer isn't even half of all the injury car wrecks. We know all that. So we take all of that kind of in the algorithm and say, okay, well, cost per case in this DMA is X. Cost per case in this DMA, is Y. And so, I was just looking at a firm for a friend of mine who's in a transitional market, right? And it's a transitional market between Orlando DMA and the West Palm DMA. Okay, the Orlando, Florida DMA, the spend there is astronomical, right? It's like $8 million a month, I think it was, or something.
Yeah.
West Palm, it's less than $2 million a month. More people in Orlando, not 8 times as many people, but more people in that DMA. So when you do that math and you're looking at it, it's like, okay, where do I want to play first? Where can I be most competitive? It's a no-brainer.
Right.
It's the West Palm DMA. Now, in that particular scenario, there's a few other factors that we would look at. But we take that data, break it down, and say, okay, what can we get a lead call for? What can we get a case for? Right? Because that's what we want is cases. Most marketing firms, marketing agencies, whatever, they're selling, well, the cost per lead is X. Well, who cares? I mean, a phone call is not, you're not making money off taking phone calls.
Especially when you hear from, specifically, there's a lot of pure lead generation companies in the legal space.
Yeah.
And, there's times where you might only get 10% of everything that they send you, and that's 9 times out of 10 not a good return for you.
Correct.
So, and unfortunately, because there's so many of them, a lot of firms that we've talked to have dealt with, I tried one, I tried with another, and when you add up that money, it's an incredible amount of money over the span of a year that they're spending, not even to focus on getting cases, but just getting the leads.
Because, and I think the important part of that is, most of it is them reaching out to the lawyer, right? They're sending a cold email, they're making a cold call, they're stopping them in the hallway at some convention, whatever. Let me just be very clear. Any legal marketing company that is sending you a cold email to hire them does not know a whole lot about marketing, okay? Obviously it works. They know about selling. They know about selling, and they're able to get clients. That does not translate in the legal world where we do not do direct solicitation, cannot do direct solicitation. We have to actually build a brand. It's not just the marketing, it's the branding. It is the trust so that when people need us, they remember us and relate to us. And so it's a very different thing. But at the end of the day, it's not the lead, right? We track leads or whatever, but really just to see if there's an aberration.
You're only really looking at leads to see like how many are junk, right? I mean, that's really what you're looking at.
What's our close rate based on how many we wanted to close, right? So that is really not a metric. I mean, the metrics are what's our cost per case? What's the lifetime value of the case? In other words, lifetime value, like, yes, this case has a ACV, an average case value on its own when it comes into my firm. We're going to get value out of that case. All these cases combined have an average case value. But here's what I know. I know that if 33% of my cases are coming from former client referrals, that actual case also has a multiplier. Absolutely. It now has a third additional value because I'm going to get some case from it. And then I'm going to get a third of my cases from that. And so there's a lifetime value associated with that case, which drives how much we're willing to pay, per case in each DMA. And so obviously then we look at close rate. Of the cases we wanted, how many are actually closing? And that's where intake comes in. Intake is so under-focused on, but it is one, if not the most important aspect of any law firm operation. And people do intake differently. At some law firms, the lawyer that's handling the case deals with intake. At other law firms, they totally third-party it out, and it's some service, that they're using that deals with intake.
You might have a paralegal, who's yeah. And I think that, and it goes back to, I think it begins with one of the hardest things that you do in any business is 2 things that a lot of people get wrong, and it's the hardest thing I think you're going to do when you're talking about expansion is hiring the right people. When we're talking about, like, something that I talked about 10 minutes ago was this idea that, like, when people call in, they want to talk to someone. They might have gone through the most traumatic thing that they've ever gone through. They might have lost a loved one. They might have lost a limb. We could go through the list of things. You need to have someone who is a professional, who knows how to handle those calls. So hiring the right person is hard, but also training them is incredibly important. And I think those are 2 places that just struggle with a lot of firms that just want to kind of, again, number 1, churn and burn, but don't understand the value of how important those intakes are. It might be probably only you don't know how many times they've seen your advertising. But a first call is the most important. First touch is the most important. And if that person calls in, and the back end organization of things obviously is kind of the secret in the sauce. But having someone who's empathetic and having someone that's well trained and knows how to deal with certain scenarios couldn't be more important. They are of such great value, because getting off of 8 hours of handling those calls is a tough thing to do.
Correct.
And it's very much this is in the same vein, but it's somewhat different. There's a reason the TSA agents only are allowed to work like 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
And they have to take a break every 3 hours. And if they don't and something happens, it's not their fault, because they understand how stressful that is.
Right.
We have people in the same situation that are in our intake department that we've talked to. They're on the phone for 2 hours and they're just like, I've got to stop, because these calls are, because they want to be fully invested, fully engaged. And they want the training. And that's what I'd suggest to people listening to the podcast is, you have to be so focused on that training, and not just training once, not just creating a system where they can go back and watch videos. You have to make sure that you're having a conversation with your people and that you're continually updating your training.
Yeah, and you have to, the standard operating procedure, the intake process, whatever you call it, that's really the starting point.
Right.
It's really dealt with in real world scenarios.
Yeah.
Hey, this came up, how should I handle it? And, law firm intake is very different from phone sales. A lot of people like to call it sales now. That seems to be the in vogue thing, is law firm sales. It's not sales, because we are not allowed to do a lot of things that salespeople can. We cannot make misrepresentations of our level of service. We can't compare our level of service to other providers unless it's verifiable. We cannot make you promises about the outcome of your case because we don't know. Each case is based on its own facts, and we don't know the facts just based off what you told us. Right. We cannot tell you what your case is worth. You see all these ads that says, "Oh, click here and we'll tell you exactly that's bogus." They're not even allowed to do it. So and I click on them sometimes just to see. That is going to some funnel where they do not tell you what your case is worth at the end. Yeah. They just got you to do that to click.
Right.
And so, all of that on the intake side is critical. And, if somebody has spent that time to call you, you want to make sure that your office is dealing with them. And people say all the time, well, I'm a trial lawyer, I can't take every call. That's okay. Right. Not required to take every call. Great trial lawyers still need great pipelines, because there is nothing that makes a better trial track record than cases with great facts in the pipeline, right? We know that. So having that pipeline, having that intake process is critical. It's something we focus on right out of the gate, because we want to know what types of cases are you looking for? How do we identify those, on an initial call, initial form, whatever it is? And how do we close those people? How do we get those people to trust our law firm, your law firm, the process enough? And I've spent personally hours walking through our intake team, listening to calls, in person. How do people interact? Giving them pointers, right? And it's really critical to be able to do that. It's not a separate thing. It's not a sales thing. It really is an extension not only of your marketing and your brand, but of the lawyer.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, if someone answers the phone and you are an attorney at that law firm, they are answering the phone on behalf of you. Right. And immediately.
Right.
And you can. One of the things I also think would be important for people that are listening is that a bad intake call, where you might not have, now everyone's version of bad is different, right?
Right.
You have some people that think they're bad because they didn't take the case, even though it might be a great call. They're just pissed off that you didn't take it, right? Because you might not be able to.
Right.
They have some that are just bad in general. A negative Google review will kill your law firm.
Right.
And it might be, if you're someone who's listening who's looking to expand, and you have 500 5-star Google reviews, 3 to 4 1-stars is going to put you in Google My Business hell for a long time. And as we've learned more in the last 3 years, online reputation has become so invaluable.
Especially if they're credible, right? If you click on it and it's clearly spam or whatever, then who cares? But if it's a credible review that just says these people didn't really care about me or whatever, and it's credible, that really has an impact, on your online reputation.
I mean, think about how many people now, those who are listening, more and more it is just showing that people are looking at reviews for everything, for every single thing that they do.
Right.
And a lot of those reviews come from what the first phone call was like.
Correct.
Was they did not care about my case.
Our law firms get a lot of, 5-star reviews from cases we didn't take, right? People
all the time.
Say, hey, it was a great call. They were empathetic. They referred me somewhere. They were very helpful. even though we didn't actually take the case, they felt like they wanted to.
Because they want to deal with a professional,
correct?
Right? They want to deal with professionals, just like when they're, and because there are people, and this is an honest thing to say, is that there are people that you do that intake call that really are shopping around, right? They've called 2 or 3 law firms. Right. You're the 5th. and they're trying to figure it out, so they're gonna bounce around a little bit. So like, what can you do to stand out, right? To make yourself more palatable.
And I think that's a really critical piece for new lawyers that are trying to build a practice, or just lawyers in general that are trying to grow. Is you have to identify who is it that we're trying to attract, right? Because different types of advertising work for different types of people, and most lawyers that don't have a background in marketing, most marketing agencies, whatever, they say, well, if you're a personal injury law firm, you're looking for people that are injured through no fault of their own. Well, no,
that's not necessarily true at all. Yeah.
That's a
very blanketed statement.
That's a very blanket umbrella. So first of all, here's what we know. What we know is, like, let's just take the car accident scenario. People that are injured in car accidents, okay, about 50% of wrecks are injury wrecks, give or take, depending on where you are. About 60% of those people don't hire a lawyer at all, okay? Just by definition, at least half of them were at fault for the wreck, so they don't really have a claim to make, probably. So we take off half, okay, and then we take off 60% of half that are never going to call lawyers. So now we're down to the 20%, which is actually 10% of the people that were injured and not at fault, and you work down this thing. But here's kind of the basic I tell people is the biggest group that you are after is people that were injured, no fault of their own, don't know a lawyer.
Right.
Because that's what people forget. If someone knows a lawyer, any type of lawyer, their neighbor's a lawyer, their cousin's a lawyer, their bocce partner's a lawyer, whatever. If someone's a lawyer and they're injured and they feel, they're going to ask that lawyer.
Absolutely.
That lawyer, just by virtue of being a lawyer in general, is going to have a recommendation to make. Mm-hmm. That person is going to call that recommendation. And assuming that recommendation doesn't totally blow it, probably they're going to get the case. Right. Now, they might associate somebody else, they might do whatever they do, but those 40% of the population that know a lawyer, they're out.
Right.
You're not getting them.
Right.
So you're looking for people that don't know a lawyer. What does that mean? Well, here's what that means. What that means is, in general, it's people that just moved into the community. It's lower income people that don't live necessarily where lawyers live, that never had, college classes with someone who's now a lawyer or whatever. It's a very targeted demographic. It's rural people that live in rural communities where there aren't lawyers in town, right? There's no lawyer. Like anybody who went to law school moved to the big city or whatever the case may be. So it's a very narrow segment of the population. Yeah. Now, can you be the lawyer that people know? Of course you can. You can get involved in your local Rotary Club. You can get involved in the junior league. You can coach a t-ball team. You can do all those things.
Right.
That is not going to give you, if you're trying to grow a pipeline. You can have a very comfortable life that way if that's your goal. But if you're trying to grow beyond just you servicing clients, you're going to have to do something more. You're going to have to advertise. And the key component is, who am I advertising to?
Right.
Who are the people around me or where in the community that I want to serve that are likely to call? And that's where you got to start. And you start, looking at that, figuring out, okay, well, what does that person look like? What are they likely to respond to? Yeah. Right? And we have, we have some firms that say, well, really underrepresented portion of the population are like our middle-aged white guys, right? Yeah. They never call lawyers because they just say, oh, I can handle it, or
and we've run into those guys.
And we've run into them.
Yeah.
And we say, okay, well, let's figure out how to target them. What do they respond to? Well, they respond to sports. They respond to college sports. So, all right, well, let's try to take your brand or this brand and try to develop that around some of those voices and faces that they respond to. College sports, okay, that had some success. So, really breaking that down to a granular level before you've ever spent $1. Right. Like, you never spend $1 on advertising, because it's also very easy to go spend the money, get the calls from people that totally don't relate to you or what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're out there just advertising, this kind of big net, catch all the fish approach, you're going to get a lot of speed people. They want to check fast, fast, fast. Speed and settlement value are inversely proportional.
Right.
Faster it happens, usually, the lower value you're getting. So if you are a great trial lawyer who's trying to maximize value for that person because they really need it, but they're only interested in speed and getting a quick check, that relationship is not going to go well.
100%. Yeah. And again, it goes back to so much of this is based on knowing who you are, right? And knowing who you want to communicate with,
right,
and knowing who you want to help, right? The big blanket stuff might help for only a very short period of time until you get overwhelmed, and then because you haven't thought about it, right, you realize, oh, I've got all these calls and I want to help all these people. Maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, right? There's a reason why there's doctors that just deal with feet.
Right.
There's a reason why there's just doctors that deal with arm injuries, right? Instead of like, well, I'm going to a doctor. Well, that person's going to refer you to someone who can specifically help you with that thing.
Right.
And like that's just part of the process. So if you
the
walk
same
into
thing
this,
in
you
marketing,
don't know,
like,
you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, there's enough foot problems for all of it. Like, there's enough of this type of case for just you if you niche down. Like, the riches are in the niches. Like, that's what people say.
Right.
And I think, tracking that is really difficult because when you're in the area and you just feel like you need more cases, you're more likely to take cases that you shouldn't take.
Right.
And that is the downfall of a lot of people because those cases take time. You get down in the weeds and then you
probably have to pay experts on that because you don't know, so you're losing money on it already.
Right.
It's gonna. There's also the chance you're not going to win the case. You're not going to make money for the client, and again, it goes back to the relationship part where you're not providing the best quality service that you can. Even if you're churn and burning, you still want to provide great service.
Right. So, all right. So we figured out kind of who we are as a lawyer, what it is we're looking for, what type of clients, what type of cases, what are we really passionate about, what makes us tick.
Where do we want to go?
We're looking at the DMA. We've looked at the numbers. We've got all the data. We've, gone in and done a deep dive. I mean, we've got the capability of watching people's actual ads and everything that they've run and when they've run them and all that. I mean, we get really granular.
We understand that intake is
king.
King.
We got to get that. One of the great things that we focus on with our firms every year. There's a responsiveness survey that comes out in awards. Secret shoppers we do all the time.
Yep.
We want to make sure that we are getting back to people, that we are being empathetic, that we are being the audience.
Right.
That's all key. Great. I'm ready to start my branding, start my marketing journey. What are some, as we start spending the money, what are some of the dashboards that you're looking at kind of every day? What are some of the numbers that you're looking at? Tell us kind of about the day-to-day. Here's what we're looking at to determine if what we're doing is working.
Right. I mean, I think there's so many ways you can do it. First of all, I think I would start one step ahead of that or behind it. Either way, a step before is we're not in the world anymore where this stuff can be tracked via Google Sheets and that's it, right? Or a spreadsheet, right? That's just not going to work anymore, right? There's number one, there's a lot of free tools that you can use, and number two, like you're not going to be able to make any conclusions by just having a bunch of clients on a sheet or having a bunch of website information on a spreadsheet. That's not going to work, right? So I think what you're looking at is a handful of things. Obviously, depending on the size of your firm, you're looking at how many intakes came in. It goes back to intakes.
Right.
How many were booked due to that, right? And then also, so that's the first thing you're looking at. What were the intakes? How many were booked? What do we do right? What do we wrong? I think that's the first thing you've got to look at all the time. The second thing you've got to look at is the call volume, right? Is the calls coming from the right location, right? And if they are, what types of calls are they, right? Has the blanket been casted too wide to where you're taking in too much stuff than you can need? And also, let's say you're getting a lot of calls, but they're not in your niche.
Right.
So that needs to be examined, right? And then if it comes back to like your advertising, you got to make sure that like you're looking at what the sources of those calls were coming from, right? So then it goes back to intake. Does your technology allow you to find out, and your questionnaire allow you to find out how did you hear about us? Or is your website and your Google program connected to an analytics section that can allow you to make sure that you're seeing things in real time and obviously on a day-to-day basis, right? So much of it goes back to making sure that you have a dashboard that gets you to show where your information, where the calls are coming from, not just location, but how they were sourced, right? because that's going to also be able to tell you your referral piece of this, right? Then I think after that, you're looking at all the marketing data side of things.
Correct.
Then you're looking at your website stuff. Then you're looking at maybe your SEO part. Now SEO they're finding more and more, usually it's about 120 days for SEO marketing to work. But really they're saying it takes almost 14 months to get that done. So is that growing though? Are you putting in the right keywords, right? What keywords are getting clicks? Are your Google ads active? Are they hitting the right people? Are your Google ads getting negative AdWords, right? Are there people that are searching you and your Google ad campaign is not specific enough for your niche?
Right.
So you're getting people that are just putting in, for example, and we've dealt with this before, they're just putting in lawyer. And they're calling you because they put in lawyer. They might not be looking for that.
Right.
They might be looking for an employment attorney, and you might not handle that.
Right.
So then it just creates this wave of really lost money. So you're trying to figure out how are you optimizing your money the best way you possibly can.
Right. And that's why, the key metric is really closed percentage of cases that we wanted.
Right.
It's not closed percentage of intakes because, there could be one, you talk about SEO, and there's all these companies out here that'll sell you 10 blog posts a month for,
for tens of thousands of dollars.
For whatever, and it's the magic bullet and all that. We know that is,
It does help, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of investment. And
that's a very charitable way of putting it.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, maybe one of those blog posts, let's just say you're a car wreck lawyer, you're a PI lawyer. One of those blog posts talks about settlement distribution or something during a divorce. I'm just making that up.
Right.
Well, all of a sudden, you're getting all these divorce calls because that blog post is now pinging for divorce, and people are putting in divorce lawyer.
Correct.
It has divorce, it has lawyer. You're getting all these calls from that page. If you're not tracking that, you have no idea where that's coming from.
No clue.
But what's better for you? What's better for you is to go remove the word divorce from that blog post, because your intake team is spending time and money handling divorce calls, which you're never going to take or be able to help. You're spending, money directing people back to you because the way that the marketing works, and so it's like that level of granular information seems like, oh, well, that's kind of silly. I wouldn't need to know exactly what webpage, but it's helpful because if all of a sudden you're getting all these divorce calls, you need to know why. Address it. One of the things we want to know from everybody that comes through any of our firms, how did you hear about us? Everybody asks that, right? I mean, you call the local plumber now and they're like, well, how did you hear about us?
Right.
That's a base level question.
Right.
They could have heard about you any number of ways. That has no correlation.
I heard about you from my friend. That's good.
Great.
That's fine.
That's not the important question. It's important. We
It
want to
is.
know what was top of mind. What is top of mind for you now about how you heard about me? The key question, though, for someone calling you is, where'd you find my phone number?
Right.
Because we could hear about something all day long, not be able to find the phone number, not be able to find a website, not be able to find a contact. That does that lawyer, that law firm, zero good.
No.
Right? We have all heard, about different law firms, that have come up. Well, how we heard about them is going to give us absolutely no correlation to whether or not we're going to call them. Sure,
Right.
we've heard about them. I would never call them. It's sort of the feedback.
Right.
So that's not the key. The key is, where did you find our phone number? How did you contact us?
Right.
And sometimes those things are the same.
Right.
Often they're different. And people are surprised by that, right? So we're a big proponent of, what is it we're trying to get people to do? If we're trying to get people to call us, put a phone number on the ad.
Right.
Sounds legendary, but really.
Well, and also, like,
a lot of people aren't doing that.
And if you're going to do that, I mean, and this is where other people make mistakes that are trying to grow or just get started, is that, like, there's so many free technologies where you can use, if your law firm is not mobile, meaning that if it is not your website and everything involved in your online marketing is not built for a mobile phone, right, then you're making a massive mistake.
Right.
Every time a phone number is on your website, it should be clickable. Every time, that's, again, you're trying, part of what you're in a race.
Right.
Right. And the less that someone has to try in order to contact you is a good thing.
Right.
So it has to be some efficiencies there. And technology-wise, there's something just like, I'm getting enough calls off of what I'm getting. You know, when I go to the next place, I'll be fine. You know, it's just like, that's not how this works. Like we're in a tech, even though this is a law firm business and a marketing business, this is a tech business.
It's a tech business.
And tech is changing right now. As we're talking right now, we're going to have a different conversation, you and I, about where tech is 6 months from now compared to where it is now, because that's how quick it moves. So if you're not willing to change how you communicate and how you obtain them, then you're going to have a major problem real quick.
Right. And, you know, the idea that, well, I'm getting enough from what I'm doing, so it must be working. We hear that a lot.
All the time.
And that's fine. If that's someone's mentality, that's totally up to them. But it's just not true, because you may be getting enough from spending, let's just say, you know, $50,000 a month, but you're overpaying by 4 times for each case you're getting compared to other people in the market. So just from a, you know, common sense place, you are wasting money, right? Nobody likes to waste money.
Right.
Even though you're able to spend the money and you're able to get what you need for your law firm, you know, to survive, you could be reinvesting that in growing or just keeping it, right? To improve your family's life or whatever the case may be. Give your staff bonuses. There's a novel idea. Like, whatever it is, you can do better if you have the right data. And so we're a huge data driven operation. We like to see the data because there's people behind the data, right? And it's not anecdotal, it's actually verifiable data that is usable. You know, there's a lot of what I would call data blind, you know, law firm owners, lawyers, marketing agencies even, where they say, well, you know, here's your report, and it says right here, last month that through this campaign we sent you 180 phone calls. Okay. First question. What percentage of that 180 phone calls were actually potential new clients? Because here's what we know. You talked about mobile. Current clients, defense lawyers, insurance adjusters, medical providers, my kid's school. There's any number of people, marketing agencies, there's any number of people calling my law firm. And in general, when they're looking for the phone number, they're going to put it in Google, or they're going to put it in Bing, or they're going to put it in Yahoo, if you know, and they're going to do their search. And if the first thing that comes up is a digital ad with my phone number and it's easy, they're just going to click that and call me. I paid for that. Well, that didn't do me any good. Right? That didn't do me, like, I'm not getting a new case out of that. That helped them find my phone number easier. So, like, okay.
Is that data then, so the examination, the thing you have to ask yourself is the data is the data giving me value?
Correct.
Right. Is the data giving me value to make informed quality decisions? Right. And if it's not, and that needs to be asked about every data set. And, you know, and those who are listening, like, we have a scorecard within our program, and within the law firm's program, where every week we're looking at certain numbers. And every quarter the decision is made and the conversation is, do we want to keep something, take something out, add something in, And if you're not asking yourself that all the time, then does the numbers bring you value? Does the data that a marketing firm is bringing you, your intake team, the intake team that you hired, potentially, third party, are they giving you the information and the data and the value that you need? Then that is not a good investment for you, especially when you're looking to grow.
Right. And the idea, you know, this idea of vanity, just seeing yourself everywhere like that's not necessarily good marketing, right?
No.
I mean, you know, chasing cases you can't serve is not useful. What you want to be getting are all their calls and the cases that you can, and that really starts at the beginning. The second piece, you know, is really the counseling of, you know, what we talk about of over marketing and under delivering. There's a lot of that, right? People that have jumpstart success at marketing, but they're under delivering. That can set them way back in the marketplace. It can also, obviously, it creates tons of stress for them, can create, you know, ethical concerns if they have more clients saying service.
Issues with online reputation.
All sorts of issues. But, you know, one of the things that you really got to focus on is, like, how are we scaling our systems as we're scaling our marketing? And that data, that front end data, is what really tells us what our trajectory is. Right? I mean, you're able to tell, you know, on a quarterly basis, well, we think next quarter we'll sign this many cases if we do X. we think we'll sign this many cases this year. So then operational people can take that and say, okay, well, we need X number of lawyers to handle those, incoming cases that are coming in. And so that data is critical, just, not just from a marketing spend, but also from an operational client service aspect.
Right.
And it's something that we look at, all the time, constantly. And there's people that are going, they're trying to go from solo to scaling. That's the key. Right? Because you don't want to drown in your own marketing success.
There's a great business in town that's a tire shop in Charleston. They have 4 or 5 places, very small, and they can crank you in and out of there. And they have 20 people working, and they're working all the time.
Right.
You can go get a flat tire, get that fixed. Boom, gone. Now you can go to a dealership. That flat tire may take you 5 hours. Right. So the question is, it's the same thing that you're doing, right? Is if when I am going and putting together a law firm, do I want to be someone that has a bunch of cases that can't handle the workload quick enough?
Right.
Which in turn, and we haven't said this, leads to more firings.
Right.
We've talked about
you become a
online
firefighter.
reputation. Right, that's all you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm
Fighting
out
fires.
because no one's talked to me in a while.
Right.
Especially if you, again, do you have the operation set up to do that? Or, do you understand, like, okay, I want to do this. I want to book this many. And in order to do that, we need to have this many people on the back end that can handle that. And not just handle it, but also handle it in an efficient manner. Right. Goes back to who you hire. Goes back to how you train. Right. Those kind of things.
Yeah, and these things have to mesh up. Like, there has to be conversation between whoever is handling the branding, the marketing, the intake, and the operational side. Because a case in and a case out that's not closed with settlement for revenue is of no value.
Right.
In fact, it's of negative value because you spent time and energy on a case where you're not actually deriving revenue for your law firm, for your business.
Right.
And as a result of that, you've gone negative on that case.
Right.
And that, that's never a good scenario, obviously. What would you say is, just kind of in your daily workflow, what's the most underrated growth tool that you use that you really rely on?
I use a lot.
Yeah.
SEM Rush.
Yeah.
And I think and the reason that I would say that, and that's to get
explain what that is.
So SEM Rush really is just a tool that helps you find out what's going on online with your organic search terms, what your traffic is like online.
Organic search terms meaning what people are actually
typing in. But the thing that's the most important is that it provides your competitors. Right, and you can put in, they have the AI now to fully understand what your business does. Shows you your competitors, shows them what their clients are searching, those kind of things, right? Again, we're in an online tech business.
Potential clients.
Right, potential clients. We're in an online tech business, I think. And if you're not understanding what your competitors are doing online, and it shows growth over time. Now, granted, you can get the free version, go on and create your own thing, but in order to really good, you have to pay some money, and it does cost a little bit of money, to able to maximize those opportunities. Right. But from a tool perspective, that it could not be more valuable, because if again, it goes back to you have to make sure you know what everybody else is doing, and if you're being left behind, which you can see online now, you have a real problem. And it's okay sometimes in a growth mindset to be left behind, because you might be looking 3 years down the road at competitors that are looking at today, right? Which is fine, but you have to make sure that every quarter or whenever you decide to examine that data, that you're making gains.
Right.
And if you're not, that's you're doing a detriment to yourself, you're doing a detriment to the people that you hired, and you're doing a detriment to the people that you want to have as clients down the road.
Yeah.
So,
favorite growth win from, the last year or so?
I mean, I think, we really, one of the things that we have done is really narrow down the type of people that we're looking for services, right? And I think that one of the things we talked about earlier is that there are so many people that need any kind of help, right? People that are looking for wills, people that are employment attorneys, lemon laws, go down the list of things. But again, finding out how to help the specific people that you can help quickly was incredibly important. I think that as the year went along,
continuing to narrow that funnel.
We narrowed that funnel incredibly tight.
Right.
And I think that really was a huge victory for us to be able to say, okay, we now know more and more about the type of person and where they're coming from. And that's one thing I think it's important for people that are listening to understand is that, you always have to be thinking about how this is going to happen, even if you've been involved in this for a long time, right? I mean, this law firm here has been around for a good amount of time, and it can't be something that you're just like, okay, I was successful one quarter, so I'm okay. No, it always has to be, how are you tightening the funnel? Right. How are you optimizing the technology to make sure that you can get clients effectively? And are you making sure that you're keeping those clients, right? So I think when you're looking at those three things, that's when you can start to get some wins. But if you're not narrowing your focus and you're trying to do too much, or you're trying to take too much in, you're wasting everybody's time. And I think from a win for us was really just narrowing the funnel as much as we could.
Always competing against ourselves to become more efficient. Right?
Correct.
I mean,
correct.
that's really, really a key. And I think, for that brand, this law firm, that was important. Moment of vulnerability. Biggest growth whiff.
Whew.
We have a lot of whiffs.
We've had a lot of those.
I mean, one of the things, and I'll just say this, one of the things that we pride ourselves on, candidly, is always experimenting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We will try something.
Yeah.
There are mistakes that are always going to be made. There are failures. We will experiment ethically, of course.
Of course. Yeah.
But there are some things that just don't work. And our goal is, let's find out as soon as possible.
Right.
Let's not live in the unknown world of, well, maybe that would have worked. Let's just try it.
There's a lot of new AI that's out there
Yeah.
that doesn't point you in the right direction.
Right.
And I think that's, I wouldn't say there's one specific, app or tech that I could point at, but I can tell you that we spend a lot of time dealing with AI online.
Yeah.
That just is not up to date.
Yeah, it's just not there.
Just not there yet. And also too, and this goes back to people that are growing, and wanting to grow. You really have to be educated about AI. And the reason that I say that is because there's a lot of firms right now, marketing law firms, legal marketing law firms, that believe they have the secret sauce. And the truth of the matter is that it's just not there yet, right? It's going to get better because people are loading stuff in, and every state is different. What can you load in? What can you request? What can they find out? What's public? But yeah, I think on AI, we took a couple places where we're like, well, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't, and they just don't provide the same thing. A good example
on
the marketing side of things, right? And I think a good example of this is that we were in a time frame for a little while where we tested AI to create web content, try to speed it up. It only makes sense. That's what you should be doing.
Right.
Try to make things faster.
Yeah, like a blog post about UIM coverage.
Right, something,
whatever.
right.
Yeah.
We went in and we created this blog post with the help of AI. I went in and then ran it into another AI system and says, are there other law firms that are using this language to promote this particular thing? It came up with 10 law firms, and it's the exact same term. Exact same thing.
Right.
That does not help you.
No, it actually hurts you.
It kills your SEO.
Right.
It kills your availability to rank higher on Google as far as trying to get something at a quick win.
Right.
So you really have to just realize AI is not the solution right now to your problem. It can help you.
Right.
But if you're going to lean into that as the solution to your problems, there was a thing that a couple years ago when marijuana became legal in Colorado, the governor came out and he said, if anybody thinks this is the solution to a state's tax problem, within the first 3 years of this becoming legal, you're going to bankrupt your state because it's just not there yet. I mean, we are in the infancy stages of this.
There's not enough people smoking marijuana.
There's not enough people smoking pot.
You can only collect taxes from the people buying.
That's exactly right.
So if the people buying are not that large a number, it's not going to be.
It's not going to happen. So there's just not enough people that have yet put their information into a system where AI has read it to fully understand.
Right, and what AI is doing really is it's taking this large language model and just duplicating, and digital marketing is all about authenticity.
Correct.
It's about uniqueness, it's about credibility, it's about relevance, and you're not going to get that unless you have it.
Right.
And you're not going to get that from the same AI that other people are using. It's the same reason that I always said, before we built our own in-house, marketing and then our own agency, it never made sense to me why there are law firms that don't demand exclusivity in their branding and marketing contracts, because how can you guarantee that I'll be number one SEO organically on Google? You know, you can't. First of all, no one can guarantee that. If they do, they're lying to you.
Yeah.
But there are
Rank
those
higher,
that would.
rank higher, maybe. Rank first, no.
But as part of the same sales pitch, tell me the other 3 major law firms in my city that you're working with.
Right.
To impress me, I guess, or
Right.
to tell me that I should do it because they're doing it, they're successful, there go, I'll be successful. Well, how does that make sense? Because we all can't be number one.
And you go back to that cold email, right? And we got a lot. I always think about this cold email I got 3 or 4 years ago, where it was someone who was in our space, in the Charleston DMA, who was not ranking higher than us, but was competitive, like in the game.
Yeah.
And they said, "Would you like to be performing as well as them?" Right? And put this thing up. And I'm thinking, well, number one, they're your client, and number two, like, I don't need to.
Right.
Number three, like, if I were that other firm, I would sit there and say, what the hell's going on around here? Right. So the very...
The answer's no.
The very idea that, like, that's... And it's happening.
It's happening.
I mean, it's happening because, look...
and there must be people buying it or they wouldn't keep doing
100%,
it.
right? 100%. And, that's why I think, again, know who you are. Know who you want to talk to, right? And also, like, it is important to trust marketing experts. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. But... you have to obviously understand that, like, this is something that is incredibly competitive.
Right.
And if you're not up to snuff on certain things,
right.
and also just, again, aware of what's happening in marketing space, then, because even though you're a law firm owner, law firm partner, you're still in a business,
right.
which in many ways, say what you want, is a tech business, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into that in order to be successful. You just can't be a great lawyer.
100%.
You just can't.
Great trial lawyers require great pipelines. We always say that. Buyer beware, carp diem, seize the day, all that good stuff. Main thing for somebody trying to go from solo to scaling in 20 seconds. First thing to focus on.
Know who you are. Know the people that you want to serve. And be organized.
Great.
Yeah, that would be the 3.
Yeah, totally agree. Data first. Thanks, Chris. Enjoyed having you on. We'll do some follow-up episodes for this. I think that this is really a good start, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much detail.
We could go into intake for 4 episodes.
We could go on intake for 4 episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, we spend hours on intake every single quarter. It is key. It is critical. And even when you've been doing it for, a decade or whatever, it can always be better.
All the time.
Great.
All the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it for another episode of the Law Dad Roy podcast. Ever wonder what a personal injury lawyer really does all day? Next week on the Law Dad Roy podcast, we are giving you a behind-the-scenes look. Whether you are an experienced legal veteran or someone just getting into the field, don't miss a day in the life of a personal injury lawyer. See you next and every Monday at 9 Eastern, wherever you find your podcasts.